Welcome to podcast Sarah and Michael.
Hey there, welcome to today's deep dive.
Hey, so glad to be here. I've really been looking forward to getting into this stack of reports.
Oh, same here. Because, imagine flying 7,000 miles to sign the biggest trade deal of the decade, right? Only to realize the person sitting across the table basically holds the key to your entire domestic political survival.
Yeah, it is. Well, it's the ultimate diplomatic nightmare. And honestly, it completely changes how we have to look at this upcoming summit.
Get ready, because today we are taking you right into the center of a geopolitical hurricane. We're looking at a fresh stack of intelligence assessments and reports, specifically dated May 8th and May 9th, 2026.
Right. They map out the extremely high-stakes summit happening next week.
Exactly. We're talking about U.S. President Donald Trump, who's 79, heading to Beijing on May 14th and 15th to meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping, who's 72.
And what makes this whole situation so compelling for you listening is that we aren't just looking at, a standard diplomatic handshake. We're looking at a scenario where a massive, unforeseen global crisis has completely hijacked the agenda.
Right. The mission for our deep dive today is to unravel exactly how the ongoing war with Iran has essentially crashed what was supposed to be this vital trade negotiation.
Yeah, it's wild.
To set the scene for you, this is Trump's first visit to China since 2017. And the meeting was originally slated for March, but it got delayed because of the escalating conflict in the Middle East.
Right.
Now it's finally happening, but the shadow of the Iran war is just looming over absolutely everything in Beijing.
Yeah, and if we rewind just a little bit, the original goals for this summit were primarily economic. Their main objective was supposed to be extending a really fragile trade truce that they managed to agree upon in South Korea back in October of last year.
Right, the South Korea truce. But the irony here is that by leaning so hard on Beijing to fix the Middle East right now, Washington has inadvertently handed China the exact leverage they need to, completely dismantle that original economic agenda.
Exactly. And let's look at how that leverage actually plays out. Because prior to this upcoming Beijing summit, the sources note that top economic officials from both the U.S. and China met in Paris.
Oh, right, to lay the groundwork.
Yeah, the Paris meetings. They were meant to set the table for a classic transactional exchange.
Right.
The U.S. went in wanting China to commit to buying more American goods, specifically agricultural products, energy, and a significant order of Boeing aircraft.
Which helps balance the trade deficit.
Right, exactly. And in return, Beijing had its own list of demands. China primarily wanted the U.S. to relax its strict export controls on high-tech goods and semiconductors.
I want to focus on those export controls for a second, because it's not just about letting China buy, fancy laptops. The U.S. has been actively trying to kneecap China's ability to develop advanced artificial intelligence.
Yes.
By blocking their access to the highest-tier microchips.
So China was really looking at this summit as a chance to break that tech embargo.
That was the foundational negotiation, yeah. But the sources reveal that the Iran war has morphed into this inescapable priority for the U.S. It's totally overshadowing those carefully laid economic plans from Paris.
The disruption reminds me of a specific analogy.
Yeah.
It's like a corporate merger where right before you sign the papers, the boardroom suddenly catches on fire. You literally cannot negotiate the merger until you figure out how to put out the fire.
That's a great way to put it.
But the thing I want to ask you about is, why is the U.S. expecting China to grab a hose? Why is China the one that has to put out the Iran fire?
Right. Well, the mechanism of that leverage is entirely economic. The U.S. desperately needs China's help right now because China is, by a massive margin, Iran's largest oil buyer.
Wow, really? The largest by far. And Washington's assessment is that this economic lifeline gives Beijing unparalleled gravity to pressure Tehran. Specifically, the U.S. needs China to use that influence to stabilize the Strait of Hormuz.
Because China buys the lion's share of Iranian crude, they're basically the only ones with the economic weight to essentially force Iran to dial back the hostility.
Right, to keep that shipping lane open. And the Strait of Hormuz dictates global energy stability. A massive percentage of the world's oil flows through that narrow choke point.
Yeah.
If it remains unstable due to the conflict, the global flow of energy is disrupted, and the ripple effects are, they're immediate.
Which brings us to the domestic fallout in the U.S. The reports paint a really direct line from a disrupted shipping lane in the Middle East to absolute desperation inside the West Wing.
Oh, absolutely.
The Iran war has caused oil prices to skyrocket. And that economic pain at the pump is translating into a major crisis for the Republican Party back in the U.S.
And timing is the critical factor here because this oil price shock is hitting just as the U.S. faces a fiercely contested midterm election cycle.
Right. And I want to remind everyone listening, we are firmly committed to impartial analysis here. We aren't taking sides or endorsing any political views. We're strictly reporting what both left-leaning and right-leaning intelligence sources are saying in this stack of reports.
Exactly. And across the board, they all point out that because President Trump is in his second and final term, his remaining political capital and his legacy are heavily tied to navigating this crisis.
Right.
He is reportedly pushing relentlessly to get a peace deal, or at least a ceasefire, secured before Air Force One even lands in Beijing.
Right. They all converge on the same cold political calculus.
Yeah.
The administration's midterm survival is directly pegged to the price of oil.
Yes. The raw political calculus is unavoidable, and, that vulnerability is really heightened by China's current diplomatic posture.
How so?
Well, while Trump is facing intense domestic pressure to lower oil prices, China is openly defying the United States authority on the global stage.
Oh, I saw this specific detail in the notes. Just last week, Beijing publicly announced that it would absolutely not comply with U.S. sanctions against Chinese companies that were targeted for conducting oil transactions with Iran.
Yep.
They basically told Washington, we're going to continue buying Iranian oil, sanctions be damned.
Right. Drawing that line in the sand right before the summit is a highly intentional move.
But, okay, I have to push back on the strategic logic here.
Go for it.
The U.S. is walking into this summit relying on China to be a partner in stabilizing the Middle East, literally days after China publicly ignored U.S. sanctions on Iranian oil. Isn't that an incredibly weak negotiating position for the U.S.? Like, you're asking a monumental favor from a geopolitical rival who just openly defied you.
It is a calculated, albeit desperate, risk by the U.S. But I wouldn't say China just wants to spring a trap. They actually want stability in the Middle East, too, because they need the oil just as much as anyone. What they see is a structural vulnerability they can slowly exploit. The analysts and our sources point out that China is looking to take advantage of Trump's weakened state regarding the midterms.
So they want predictability from the U.S., but they recognize they hold the superior hand right now.
Exactly. The strategy outlined in the reports suggests China will likely try to wash its hands of any direct involvement in their ally Iran's war. I mean, they don't want the diplomatic mess of being seen as Tehran's handler.
Right.
But simultaneously, they will use the U.S.'s desperation to deflect pressure on other fronts. They know Trump needs a win quickly, and they are prepared to play the clock to extract the best possible terms.
Which perfectly transitions into how this geopolitical leverage is sabotaging the actual business of the summit. Because now that we understand the administration's desperation regarding Iran, we can see why the economic agenda is falling apart.
Yeah, the trade negotiation is just being swallowed whole by the crisis.
The sources paint a really vivid picture of the disconnect between what the U.S. president wants out of this trip and what is actually achievable. Trump wants a massive, splashy win. He has boasted publicly about his very good relationship with Xi Jinping,
Right.
even claiming that the Chinese leader will hug him warmly regarding the Iran issue. He clearly values the pomp, the flattery, and the grand ceremony of these state visits.
And state visits are highly choreographed theater. The U.S. administration was banking on a blockbuster finale to project strength ahead of the midterm.
Right. There's still a rumor of a massive deal with Boeing currently in the works.
Yep.
And on top of that, the U.S. delegation aims to secure sweeping agreements on artificial intelligence regulations, access to critical minerals, and robust fentanyl enforcement.
But the analysts in our stack of reports are throwing cold water on all of that.
Oh, absolutely.
The consensus is that a so-called big deal is highly unlikely to materialize next week. There simply hasn't been enough preparation time, and the overwhelming focus on the Iran conflict has eaten up all the diplomatic bandwidth.
Yeah, and building on that lack of bandwidth, there's a tangible indicator in the reports that proves just how scaled back the expectations are.
The guest list.
Yes, the guest list. The delegation of U.S. CEOs flying over for this summit includes leaders from Apple, Exxon, NVIDIA, and Boeing. But it is noticeably smaller than in past presidential visits to China.
Right.
I'm looking at this shrinking CEO guest list, and to me, smaller doesn't just mean fewer parties, right? Does it just mean scheduling conflicts, or is there a deeper message being sent to Beijing?
Oh, the guest list is the message.
Really?
Yeah, a smaller business delegation reflects deep, fundamental divisions within the U.S. government regarding its overall economic policy toward China. It shows that Washington itself is fractured.
Like different departments wanting different things.
Exactly. The State Department might want one thing, the Commerce Department wants another, and the White House is entirely focused on oil.
So I'm the CEO of NVIDIA. I'm staying home because I know any tech truce signed in Beijing is going to be instantly scrutinized and potentially vetoed by a hawkish U.S. Congress anyway.
Right. The business leaders are hesitant to attach themselves to a trip that lacks a coherent economic strategy. Plus, it signals remarkably low expectations for concrete economic outcomes.
That makes sense. The CEOs see no return on investment in a photo op overshadowed by a Middle Eastern war.
Yeah, I mean, if you are running Apple or Exxon, your time is your most valuable asset. If there isn't a solid, actionable deal on the table ready to be signed, you're not going to make the trip.
Okay, so we've established that the trade agenda is essentially stalled. The U.S. is desperate for a diplomatic win on Iran to ease domestic oil prices, and China knows they control the narrative.
Yep.
That leads us to the most intense section of these intelligence reports. What is China actually going to try and extract from the U.S. in exchange for its cooperation on Iran?
This is where the negotiations move from economic posturing to hard geopolitical currency. We talked earlier about China wanting relaxed export controls on technology, but the sources highlight a much more mechanical form of leverage: rare earth minerals.
Rare earths. Those are the elements that power practically everything in the modern world, right? From smartphones to electric vehicles.
Yes, but it's not just about hoarding minerals for consumer electronics. The mechanism here is far more aggressive.
Oh.
The U.S. relies heavily on China for these specific elements like gallium and germanium. And by restricting the export of these materials, China can immediately choke U.S. defense contractors.
Oh, wow. Because you literally can't build advanced military hardware, radar systems, or precision-guided missiles without them.
Precisely the issue. China knows this vulnerability intimately. They want to use their dominance in rare earths to force the U.S. to drop restrictions on advanced technologies like AI and semiconductors.
It's a calculated chokehold on the U.S. military-industrial supply chain.
It really is a technological standoff, but the analysts in our sources point to an even more alarming potential trade-off, and it centers entirely on Taiwan.
Let's get into Taiwan.
The reports flag a highly specific escalating risk scenario. With the U.S. president entirely consumed by the Middle East and needing a domestic political win on the Iran front, Xi Jinping might see a rare window of opportunity to squeeze major geopolitical concessions out of Washington regarding Asian security.
And the specific concession mentioned by the analysts is demanding that the U.S. halt its arms sales to Taiwan.
Right. Taiwan remains the most sensitive flashpoint in U.S.-China relations. Beijing claims the self-governing island as its own territory. And historically, the U.S. has provided robust arms sales to Taiwan to ensure its defense capabilities.
So the intelligence assessments warn that Xi might try to leverage U.S. desperation over Iranian oil to force a halt or at least a significant delay in those arms sales. This sounds almost like a geopolitical hostage situation.
Yeah, it really does.
Is China basically saying to the U.S., look, we'll help you with your Middle East oil problem, we'll stabilize the Strait of Hormuz for you, but only if you look the other way in our backyard and leave Taiwan vulnerable?
That is exactly the strategic trap the analysts are warning about. And again, keeping with our impartial reporting, it's crucial to note that the intelligence sources aren't just speculating in a vacuum here.
Right.
They base this on the known variables of the upcoming summit. The risk is that Beijing attempts to use the U.S.'s Middle Eastern entanglements to structurally advance its own territorial and technological dominance in Asia.
And the sources also point out that this isn't just an abstract fear held by think tanks. They specifically highlight that Trump has a history of speaking off-script on sensitive diplomatic issues during high-pressure meetings.
Yes, that documented unpredictability.
Right. Because of that, U.S. regional allies in Asia countries who rely on the U.S. as a counterbalance to an expanding China, they're watching this upcoming summit with extreme anxiety.
They are actively looking for any signs of U.S. hesitation. They fear a scenario where the U.S. is willing to trade away long-term security architecture in Asia for a short-term fix in the Middle East.
It's a massive domino effect for you to consider. A conflict in Iran threatens the flow of oil through the Strait of Hormuz.
Which spikes U.S. domestic gas prices.
Exactly, which threatens the ruling party's survival in the midterms, which leads to a desperate negotiation in Beijing, which could potentially alter the defense capabilities of Taiwan and the entire security landscape of Asia.
It is a profound demonstration of how deeply intertwined these systems are. In global politics, Leverage in one hemisphere can entirely rewrite the rules of engagement in another.
Yeah.
The economic agenda in Beijing hasn't just been delayed, it has been fundamentally restructured by the events in the Middle East.
Which is an incredible synthesis of exactly what we set out to uncover today.
Yeah.
We started this deep dive looking at what was supposed to be a standard U.S.-China trade summit, a follow-up to the Paris groundwork.
Right.
Instead, we've seen how the need to stabilize gas prices in the United States is actively dictating the future of artificial intelligence development, the mining of rare earth minerals, and the geopolitical safety of Taiwan.
The interconnectedness of these crises forces us to reevaluate how leverage actually functions in modern diplomacy. It's rarely a straight line.
It really is a tangled web, and it leaves us with so much to consider as this summit approaches next week. So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over. Something that builds on the strategic paradox we've been analyzing in these intelligence reports.
It's the long-term question that hangs over all of this tactical maneuvering.
Right. If the United States continues to be so severely constrained by conflicts in the Middle East, that it finds itself having to essentially mortgage its economic and strategic leverage in Asia just to maintain political stability at home, what does the global balance of power actually look like 10 years from now?
Yeah, when the dust finally settles in the Strait of Hormuz, will the ultimate strategic winner of the Iran war actually turn out to be Beijing?
It's a fascinating and sobering thought to leave on. Thank you so much for bringing your expertise to these reports today.
Always a pleasure to dig into the mechanics of these events with you.
And thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep your eyes on the news next week when these two leaders finally sit down at the table. We'll catch you next time.